Hello and welcome back to the Pretty Serious Bike Racing Podcast. I'm Dane Cash, and it's time to get pretty serious. And I can't wait to get pretty serious as ever this week about the Vuelta, about the races that occurred in Plouay that have very different names.
They must have hired the Renui Tour branding people for their
They're like very
marketing.
busy in late August and early September coming up with names.
Yeah, if you have a race in August, come get us and we'll give you 28,000 different names so no one knows when you're happening or what you are.
Well, the listeners, you've now already been treated to the voice of Cosmo Catalano, co-host, bike racing analyst extraordinaire. Cosmo, how are you?
And branding expert, obviously.
Branding expert.
From those other comments. I'm well. I'm good. I'm serious. Let's do this.
Yeah, let's do this. We have a new guest today. Well, new to this specific
Quotation
podcast.
marks.
He's certainly not new to listeners of podcasts on the Escape Collective Podcast Network. You would have heard his dulcet London tones in the placeholders. Jonny Long, chief podcasting while reclined correspondent. Jonny Long. Jonny, welcome finally to Pretty Serious Bike Racing. We're really glad to have you on.
Thanks for having me. I'm slightly apprehensive that I'm going to have to be pretty serious, but I'm hoping the pretty is like a negatory of the the serious.
It does kind of take it down a slight, just one
Hedging
level.
language. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
exactly.
Okay, got it.
Can you really say he has a London accent? Isn't London so big that you have to have the little like sub-Londons?
That may be true. Yeah, Jonny, do you have a specifically? Could people tell what part of London you were from if you were out and about in the countryside?
No, not really. I probably have a bit more of a suburbs of London accent. There's probably only a couple of real London accents, but it's more of a regional thing.
Yeah.
Either you can tell if people are from like in London or from like dalliance with the outskirts.
Got it. Okay, there you go. Straight from the horse's mouth. All right, let's get pretty serious about the Vuelta, but first, listeners, you should head on over to escapecollective.com/join. If you haven't signed up, if you're listening to this podcast, this is like 30 episodes in or something at this point. It's about time you signed up. We really need your support. Everything we do on the Escape Collective Podcast Network, everything we do at escapecollective.com, it's all funded by supporters hopefully like you. So if you're already a supporter, we are very grateful. But if not, you should head on over. You can become a reader for $6.99 USD a month. You can sign up to become a full member for $11.99. You could save 30% with an annual membership. So there's lots of different ways to support everything we're doing here at Escape Collective. Again, head on over to escapecollective.com/join to find out more. All right, Vuelta España. Cosmo, where are we at this point? What's happened in just a brief, 30 seconds or less? What are the highlights of where we are at this point, just to set the scene for the conversation we're about to have?
We had some interesting sprints, but I think the focus has mainly been GC race. When last we spoke, Remco Evenepoel was in the lead and wanted to get rid of it. He got rid of it a little bit harder than maybe he wanted to on stage 6. If you watch him at the Tour de Suisse, he tends to leave a little gap when attacks start going and then crawl his way back. But he lost a little bit less than a minute to his top GC rivals. Skip ahead over a Jeffrey Soup stage win to stage 8. And we had, I believe, 3 Jumbo riders trying to beat up on Evenepoel, who had actually led into the climb with his team. They were unable to do much beating up, although Roglic did beat him in the sprint for I think, just bonus seconds. And then stage 9, we had another crazy Vuelta day where they decided to not race the GC race up the final 2 and change kilometers of the hill. So somehow in that, I think there was a small, tiny gap between Vingegaard and Roglic and Sepp Kuss, who still leads the race, but probably not for keeps.
And here we are, first rest day. They spent the night in Valladolid, north-central Spain. There's a time trial tomorrow. We'll get to that in a while. There was all kinds of interesting happenings over the course of the last 48 hours. Unfortunately for some of the riders, it took a little bit more time to get to Valladolid than they'd probably hoped. We'll get to that in a bit. For now, let's just talk about this GC battle real quick. Lenny Martinez, good job, Lenny, for being the youngest Vuelta race leader ever. And obviously someone who, even when he lost the jersey, he's been up there. He's been working really hard with the climbers, and yeah, I think he's a rider that obviously is a rider who's going to be battling in these sorts of situations for a long time to come. He's just 20 years old. Just turned 20 years old in July. So, chapeau, Lenny. But yeah, I got to say, I mean, the race has had far too many stories that are not racing-oriented. But the GC battle has been quite entertaining. It's been about as entertaining, I think, as a GC battle can be, in which the 3 race favorites all race for the same team. I can't think of a situation where 3 race favorites racing for the same team is actually any more interesting than this. So it actually is pretty interesting.
Are you outing yourself as the person behind Sepp Kuss GC on Twitter?
You
are calling him a race favorite.
I am very pro Kuss's chances. We'll get to that. I think Evenepoel is obviously up there too, but I really do think he's got a lot of time to lose. Obviously, by the time the listeners have heard this, he might have already lost 2 minutes in the TT.
Yep, that's kind of what I'm
like a dummy.
Yep, that's what I would be worried about.
Yeah, I don't know. What do we think?
I think the man can chug some sparkling wine. Holy cow!
That was the moment of the Vuelta, I think. Right? I mean, like that maybe transcended cycling media even. Yeah, I hope it did.
Carlton Kirby was speechless. Carlton Kirby was speechless.
Yeah, that's a rare occurrence. That was something else for sure. And he's not a big guy, Sepp Kuss. Like that Cava bottle was a not insignificant, proportion of his own body size, and he still managed to really he housed it.
There are some conspiracy theories going around that instead of it being Cava, it's actually rose water, because apparently that's what they fill some of the bottles with in other sports. But either way, it's a decent chug for a pint-sized man. So, do you think they should have handed out bonus seconds for that? That could be a nice little extra thing for the organisers to mess up.
Seems like something they would do at the Vuelta. This is, by the way, why you're on the show, Johnny. We need that internet conspiracy. All that intel, which I don't know that I get that. I'm not always up on that. So it's good.
I thought you'd be far enough west in the US, and I'm very much not there, so that you'd bring the Joe Rogan sort of stuff to the podcast. But if you've got to get some weird British guy to do it, then I'll play my role, no problem.
Okay, I take it back. That comment right there. That's why you're on the podcast. Actually,
okay.
It's to really fire up some of our listeners. Yeah. So. I do think that Kuss has a great chance. I want to talk about that in a bit. But first, how about some moments that stood out? Just anything that maybe went unnoticed or that we wanted to highlight. I mean, what over the past 6 or 7 days has been something that's really stood out to either of you?
For me, it's not purely racing specific. It's really more that the Vuelta seems to just have this thing like the head injury from Memento deal. They only have short-term memories, and it just resets every single day. Like, they already had a stage of the race where things were messed up near the finish, and they're like, oh, we're going to put the finish line here. Oh, wait, that's not good enough. Okay, we're going to put the finish line here. And then the race goes through, and there's no obvious finish line. And then we saw it again on stage 9. Like, there is no good. There should be a go bag with everything you need for the finish line, and they should be ready to deploy that at any point in the race. Communicate it out, just clearly make the call, get it done. I mean, I think stage 9 looked to a viewer like, maybe they didn't need to do this because they did actually have the stage race, the stage win, competitive all the way up to the finish. But it just seems like they're completely caught on their heels every time this happens. And I don't want to make it entirely a bad thing. I think the word you used to describe the GC battle was entertaining, and I think that's applicable. Like, it is definitely entertaining. I just think that there's good entertaining and bad entertaining, and the Vuelta really wants more good entertaining. Like Caden Groves went on stage 4, I think it was, where no one seemed entirely sure exactly where the finish line was because it was so twisty, it was so narrow. That was actually kind of good entertaining. That was a really cool sprint and really showed like what the rider Caden Groves is developing into. But stuff like, we don't know where the finish line is, we need an extra 45 minutes to an hour after the race to know what the GC gaps are, that is kind of less good entertaining. And I don't know, with the backing of the ASO, how they're not more kind of tuned into this.
I do want to go back, just in case our listeners aren't film buffs of fantastic early 2000s films.
It launched Christopher Nolan's career.
Exactly. In this film that you reference, Guy Pearce cannot form new memories every time he wakes up. So he goes through the day, he tattoos stuff on his body so that he'll remember the next day when he wakes up, because otherwise he just forgets everything. And that's a really good analogy. It's like the Vuelta, every day there's something new. They've forgotten how to... And you're right, this is an ASO owned event. You would kind of expect better. I mean, this is not just your local crit.
Yeah, but maybe all the like proper top ASO employees are all still on holiday, because in France you just get like
true.
a bunch if you work like more than 30 hours a week. So I think that could be a reason. But it's interesting what you say about the difference between like good and bad entertaining, because the bad entertainment comes because they're trying to protect the good entertainment, so you don't lose one of these GC guys. So I guess if you didn't have the bad entertainment, you just have no entertainment, maybe, if like half of them crash out on like a muddy crash. So like people, there's always like following any sort of debate online with bike racing is just a non-starter really. But if you don't, the race organizers anytime could do anything to change the race, or if something happens like, and you can't win. And to be honest, seeing like a middle-aged woman standing on a little step ladder, like noting things down with a camera, and there's 2 cones, that's the most like, this is a great... Our sport's professional, but the reason we love it is because someone could just put cones out.
I actually really like that. It's not... Yeah, I mean, hadn't thought of it that way. I feel like the Vuelta organizers probably... You're the target audience then. Because that certainly has what it's felt like. It's definitely, inches away from disaster at every moment. Yeah. Johnny, we briefly brought this up, but the Valladolid hotel situation, the rest day probably wasn't as restful as maybe had been hoped.
Yeah, just a quick story that sort of emerged this morning. There were 2 charter flights for the Vuelta to take them to Valladolid, and the second one got caught in like a storm, and so it couldn't complete the journey, so it had to land in Madrid. And then all of the riders and everyone had to then get like coaches or buses to Valladolid from Madrid. So Edward Turns was saying how he turned up at his hotel at 3:15 in the morning, and he hadn't really eaten because the team staff were waiting at the hotel or at the airport to pick them up, give them snacks, give them food. So not the best recovery after 1 week of a Grand Tour, to be honest.
Yeah, not ideal. Definitely another day at the Vuelta, though. I mean, that's kind of been the vibe this year. Hopefully the riders will be rested coming into the time trial. We'll see.
Well, I mean, if you're going to be not rested, a time trial for 90% of the riders in the race is a good time for it to happen.
That's a good point. Yeah. But not so for Sepkus, Primož Roglič, Remco Evenepoel, Jonas Vingegaard. For me, the moment that I kind of wanted to just dig into it just a little bit was not GC related. It was actually the sprint of a veteran racer who finally got a big win. I really loved Jeffrey Soup's long range, coming out of that corner in good position and going all the way. He was not the favorite for the sprint. He wasn't the second or third or the fourth or the fifth. He was way down the list of favorites, and yet he just really played that perfectly. His stage win, his first ever Grand Tour stage win. He's 35. He'd never taken a Grand Tour stage win. He'd never taken a World Tour stage win, period. And he just positioned himself perfectly. We've seen Caden Groves be really, really strong so far in this race, and I think 9 times out of 10, just in a head-to-head speed matchup, Caden Groves is going to win. But this particular stage, you needed to come out of that corner in a good position, and that is exactly what Soup did. And I loved it. Loved seeing him win. Loved the reaction after, the disbelief when he was told it was a victoire for him. Yeah, it was great. So good on Jeffrey Soup. Nice job getting that big win after a not short time spent in the peloton. All right. This new little semi-segment here. This was an idea from Kelly Fretz. Suggested if we had, any props to give out for riders making smart moves, we should. alternatively, the less smart decisions. We could highlight some of those. So I asked our co-hosts come up with some either smart moves or moments of questionable judgment. And Cosmo, what did you come up with?
I came up with Jumbo, just in general, and I guess maybe more specifically on stage 8. They had pretty clearly a huge advantage over Remco. They had 3 guys who were super strong. They started off kind of in a sensible way, sending Kuss up the road, and Remco sensibly didn't react. He actually was adjusting his glasses when the attack happened and kept on adjusting his glasses. And you really, you only get so many chances to capitalize on a rival that isolated. We could be saying, oh, they're so strong, they'll have the whole race to get more time. But he wasn't looking great on the previous GC day. I think, for the real Sepp Kuss GC believers, that was maybe kind of a silly attack because it really felt like he was setting up for the other two to do something, and they kind of didn't. You could say that Roglic did win the stage, got some seconds, but, that's... For the numbers they had and the situation they had, it feels like they were just kind of showing off more than anything else. So
I'm gonna take this opportunity because you're teeing me up with a great segue here, because I think Remco deserves some credit, possibly for the first time in his career, for some smart tactical racing. We here in the Escape Collective Podcast Network I feel like we're kind of ruthless with Remco and his strategy. I know that when I've been on placeholders, there's been some ruthlessness, and on this very podcast, Cosmo, you and I have criticized it. Abby always criticizes Remco's tactics, but you know what? I think he played things really well on stage 8. He essentially rode as a train of one. He just hit the front, rode really hard, and discouraged attacks as if he had a whole train of riders doing this for him. But it was just him. He was just there by himself. He had basically no support. And he just did what he might have done had he had a team of, sky riders in front of him in 2015 or something. But they weren't there. It was just Remco. And it kind of worked. He did a really good job of discouraging attacks and limiting any potential damage that Jumbo might have done. I think the Jumbo numbers advantage is going to be a massive hurdle for him to overcome. And it already has, but we already saw their third rider pick up a bunch of time by getting into a break. But admirable attempt so far from Remco to limit what they can do.
Do you think that Remco's sort of cosplaying as how life would have been if he'd got the move to Ineos Grenadiers?
Ooh,
sort of imagining having Laurens de Plus and whoever, Kwiatkowski, all ahead of him. And then he's just in his mind's eye, it's sort of, what do they call it? Like when you manifest something.
Yeah,
so
he's
if you manifest it, they're ahead of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they're just pulling you up the climb.
Ideally, he can manifest some teammates between now and the end of the race because it's going to be necessary. And I don't know that the Remco train of one thing is going to work every day, but smart move thus far.
It may work tomorrow.
Yeah, well, there's that. All right, any questionable decisions or smart moves that you wanted to call out, Johnny?
It's more a question for you guys. I feel if I've got you both here, I can actually ask you bike racing questions and get an answer instead of during the day. During most working days, I'm just on my own until the Americans wake up, so I have to keep these thoughts to myself. But it occurred to me that maybe more teams should have brought sprinters to this Vuelta, especially if you consider the Tour, where Jasper Philipsen basically won everything. You think a few more teams would think, maybe we need some more Grand Tour victories this season. Shall we send some guys who could beat Caden Groves? No disrespect to Caden Groves, but there are definitely some faster guys than him in the World Tour peloton.
I think this is a great point, Johnny. I think it goes beyond questionable decision to... Actually, there's no question. I think the teams that didn't bring sprinters that could have gotten stage wins were foolish. This was a foolish decision. It wasn't even questionable. I completely agree. There are a lot of wins being left on the table for a lot of teams in this race. Good on Caden Groves for being the one to take them, but you would think that had anybody brought, a decent sprinter, they could have challenged him because he kind of is the only one. Basically every day when I'm doing the up next preview, if it's a sprint stage, he's the favorite. That's not going to change between now and the end of the race as long as he's in the race. So yeah, good point, Johnny. Great point.
Especially when you consider the fact that outside of sort of Jumbo and Soudal Quickstep, how many teams can really say they have a dog in the GC fight?
Yeah.
So like bring your Enric Masses or Alexander Vlasovs, but then you probably don't need like a full complement of domestiques to go with them. Because by the time the race is getting serious, or pretty serious, they're all going to be jettisoned out the back.
Totally.
It's. I feel like hunting. We're targeting stage wins versus like we have a sprinter, we have a GC team. Is the new. We're taking it day by day. Where it's like we don't actually. There's a bunch of. We're showing up. Maybe some stuff happens. Like
we don't know what the hell's happening. Yeah. All right. I want to herald someone real quick because I think he has come a little bit closer than I expected him to so far in this race. Although maybe looking at the start list, it shouldn't be that surprising. Edward Toons may be the guy at some point to overhaul Caden Groves in a straight-up sprint. He's been third twice. He was sixth on stage 5. He's a rider that I think like 10 years ago I thought was going to be the maybe not the next big thing, but he seemed very promising as a 22, 23-year-old. And the big wins have been hard to come by. He did win a stage at the old Bink Bank Tour. But that's it. And I think that's the sum total of his World Tour victories. And he's knocking on the door here in this race. He's got a lot of speed. He can hold on to his sprint for a decent amount of time. So, yeah, keep your eyes peeled for Edward Toons. If you're playing the fantasy game, if you haven't used him yet, I'm assuming you've already used your Caden Groves pick, but Edward Toons might be your guy for a sprint stage.
He was one of the riders on the late night flight, and he was not very happy about it. So let's hope he uses that
there we go.
Annoyance
Right
and channels it into... Yeah, exactly.
Of all of the sort of disciplines within cycling, that might be useful. So I feel like sprinting is the one. I don't think you really want to ride on anger as like going up a long climb. That seems like the kind of thing where you can attack really early and then get dropped. But as a sprinter...
You're referring to the Marc Soler way of climbing.
Yes, exactly. But I love it. I love that. I love seeing that. So don't ever change,
Same.
Mark. Yeah. Any other thoughts on our current situation at the Vuelta?
I'm looking forward to having a sensible GC picture, which is something the race has foiled entirely so far. I'm honestly, I'm not a huge... I don't get hugely excited for TTs, but I'm kind of excited for this TT. We know, Remco with his arrow skin, and I think Ronan calculated that Vinigo has a negative coefficient of drag. The air flees from in front of him. So I wanna see these two kind of throw down. I know it's not the Tour, but it is unusual to have a TT where I am both excited to see its impact in the GC race and to see two really strong people go head to head in a discipline they are very good at.
So in American football, the first down line is digitally superimposed over the field. In hockey, I'm of the opinion that you can never see the puck, so I kind of love it when they make the puck visible on TV. It'd be really cool if they could find some way to make the little air particles visible in front of Remco.
Oh yeah,
so we could see them jumping out of the way as he TTs his way in Valladolid.
That is a great shout.
But I don't know that that's going to happen anytime soon. All right. At this point in the race, Cosmo, your favorite thing to do.
Oh, we do picks?
I want to know who you think is going to win the race.
Oh, the whole race? Now?
The whole Vuelta España. You can change it.
I might know less than before the race started. No, I'm gonna go with Vinigo. He's looked like he's pretty fit, pretty dialed in. He has kept a super low profile so far. His team is incredibly strong. I think Remco comes to this race with big motivation to win, and he's certainly sort of made himself the main character so far. But I don't see how he is going to manage 3 weeks with I don't want to say lack of team support. He has some strong riders here, but certainly not dictating terms the way Jumbo is.
If this were the talk radio show that I wanted to be, Cosmo, that was your opportunity to just completely trash Soudal Quickstep. But
no,
you're a you're a generally very respectful person, so I appreciate that you're not going to.
Well, me and Patrick Lefevre, we're really,
Yeah, you're tight like that.
People dismiss him, but I can relate to him. I really, when he's like, I don't have enough money to do the thing I want to do all the time in every interview. He's just like, I'm like,
True. Yeah. All right. Johnny?
Yeah, I want to pick Remco because I think he's just really... It must be something about racing Jumbo-Visma at Grand Tours which just makes the other guys seem just very personable. I'm gonna get told off for this by listeners, but and Primož Roglič I think is the antidote to it. But after the whole Richard Plugger you can't drink thing, and then seeing Sepp Kuss on the podium with the champagne, it's just even that sort of softened it a bit. But I really want, but Remco's just been fantastic on the bike and off the bike. But I just don't think he's gonna. I think he got off lightly last year, and just everything came together somehow for him. But I agree with everything Cosmo says about Vingegaard, but I'm going to stay a bit romantic and believe that Primož Roglič will win, his fourth Vuelta?
Yeah, fourth.
And the main reason for that is that then heading into next year's tour, we will have the inevitable conversation of, well, Vingegaard's won it twice before, but also Roglič won the Giro and the Vuelta last year. And then we get to do the whole who's the leader in the team thing.
It'd be great.
So I'm just hoping.
I'm on board with that as well. I think Roglič is the favorite still. I picked him in the beginning. I haven't changed my mind yet. Okay, if Sepp Kuss can hold on, that would be even more romantic and amazing. Because America. But also, I do think he has a legit chance to finish, like, at least on the podium. I think he's a real contender, Kuss. But I do think that Primož Roglič is probably the favorite.
The more a contender he is, the better a teammate he is, right? So they're going to try to keep him up there, but I just, we'll see what the GC looks like after the TT.
Did you see Sepp Kuss's Strava upload of stage 6, which he won?
No, I didn't.
So he uploaded a photo, I think it was a meme of him, and it was him with an American flag and eagle superimposed behind him. And then the text. I don't know if you can swear on your podcast, but you can just
I know the text because I've seen the tweet, but you can say it. Tell our listeners.
And it's Sepp Kuss saying, "What the fuck is a kilometer?" And it's just great.
Yeah, I love that. All you have to do is mark it explicit, and we can say whatever we want. Yeah, I loved that. Good on Sepp. Being a memer. I feel like that is what really gets you in Jonny Long's good graces, is memery. So
it's effective and fun and enjoyable.
All those things, yeah.
I just want to know that they're looking at them. So then the memers continue, I want to know that they're seeing.
Yeah. All right, let's take a quick look ahead. Give the listeners a little bit of a idea of what's coming up. So as we've mentioned multiple times, there is a time trial on stage 10. By the time you're listening to this podcast, it could very well have been finished, depending on how quickly you listen.
Should drop it right in the middle of the TT. Right at the start of the TT, put the podcast up.
If you're watching a really slow rider, you might get through the whole podcast during the TT. It's very flat. So this would favor anybody who's really good at time trialing. Unfortunately for Remco, the world time trial champion, I think that's also true of Primož Roglič and Jonas Vingegaard being good at flat TTs. The one rider this really does not suit is Sepp Kuss. He's not really known for his flat TT prowess. I guess it doesn't really suit Enric Mas either. Yeah, he's not going to love it. But your main favorites will, with the exception of Sepp Kuss. Then, the climbing resumes. Because there's a Cat 1 finish to stage 11. There's a Especial finish on stage 13.
Yes, thank you.
As they go up the Col du Tourmalet, which I feel like that should be an hors category climb, right? Because they're in France by that point, so they got to switch over to the French way of categorizing climbs.
You've forgotten that France franced every climb when it went to the UK.
Oh, they did? All right, so this is just retribution for...
I don't know if it's retribution. I think this is the ASO's... The French race has French names. The Spanish race has Spanish names. Yeah.
Or category climb / Especial climb into a Cat 3, into a Cat 1 finish on stage 14. That's the day after the Tourmalet. They're doing that. Another very hilly stage on stage 15, up near Pamplona. So the sprinters have had their chances, and unfortunately for them, there's going to be a lot of climbing ahead. The day that doesn't finish on a climb still has some climbing. So, yeah, stages 10 through 15 have a lot of GC action. Plenty to keep us entertained here.
And if you don't like climbing, you can watch the Tour of Britain, where every single stage is basically flat, and there are no time bonuses. So right up until the final stage, I'm pretty sure that every single rider is going to be on the same time.
I like that there's no time bonuses. It makes it more interesting.
You think that, but then give it like 3 days, and it's what you were saying earlier, or Cosmo was saying earlier about just like waking up every morning and it's the same.
How do you do a tiebreaker in those situations?
They do count
I think
back,
it's count back. I think it's count back, but then the final stage, I think there is a bit more of a climb up to the finish, but still.
Yeah, the stage 8, what's that in Wales? I guess has some lumps. I'm looking at
just
the
in
route.
case you don't like the Vuelta, there are other options out there.
Stage 7 has some lumps, probably ends in a sprint. They do start at Tewkesbury, which if you're a Wars of the Roses fan, big battle there. So
if you're a Massachusetts resident, it's a stop on the commuter rail.
Who's not? Well, Richard III probably not a big fan, which is a joke that only if you actually know about the Wars of the Roses, Anyway,
Richard III is you could know Shakespeare and get the
that's
Richard
right. You don't have to be a
reference.
historian to know about Shakespeare. That's true. All right, quick little trip over to Brittany, because we're going to do a quick conversation about the racing in Plouay, which was at the World Tour level, deserves some attention, and I actually really liked what's the opposite of symmetry? The asymmetry. I don't know why I didn't come up with that right away, but there we go. I like the asymmetry between these two races, because the point that when I'm watching both the women's and the men's race, which have very different names,
despite being on the same course,
almost the exact opposite thing happened in both races. So on the women's side, Misha Bredevold was your winner, sprinting to victory with what I thought was a far too long sprint. She was in the wind for many seconds.
I will argue this point.
And it tactically seemed like not the best way to approach a sprint. Didn't matter. She still won. And I watched the race, and at the end I'm thinking, sometimes you're just better. And if you know that, then do what you want. So props to Misha Bredevold for being the 9,000th SD Works one-day race winner there. Good for her. And good for her for just trusting in her ability to sprint from far out. She was in a good position with like a K to go, but she didn't really have any semblance of, protection from the wind in the final 300 meters, and still beat everybody.
There's wind and there's wind. The wind was coming from the opposite side of the road, but I'm going to roll back a little bit because I think this was really good from SD Works' point of view. You had a long break all day, was caught, I want to say, around 10K to go, and there were a lot of kind of a surge attacks that went away. A really good one from Audrey Cardon-Ragot that I thought was going to finally split things up. But Marlon Reusser kept bringing things back, and then about a K to go, the race really has a pedalable downhill into the final 500 meters, 600 meters, and Reusser just pinned that. And I think they knew that after that happened, there would be kind of an accordion regrouping, because all the riders who couldn't keep up when she was hammering would have that momentum from the hill and kind of come back together. And Bredevold kind of came out of that. She didn't hit it perfectly where she slingshotted by, but she came in with momentum. She kind of took a couple pedal strokes, I think looked for a wheel to follow, and then it was just like, screw it, and went straight ahead. But she did it on the sheltered side of the road. And Elisa Balsamo was on the other side of the road, seemed to do a similar thing from a similar position and just couldn't get anywhere. One, she looked kind of flat, but two, if you look at the flags on the side of the course, the wind is coming completely like 90 degrees to the road from Balsamo's side. And it wasn't a hugely windy day, like there weren't big echelons, but I think in a sprint like that, it kind of matters because nobody really came close to Bredevold the whole time. She was just stronger than everyone else, and I think that might have been what SD Works was going for. So
in the end, she actually was tactical and smart about it.
I mean, there's tactics and there's like, I have momentum, I'm going to go.
Yeah, and it worked. Obviously it worked. She won. Mm-hmm. Good on Bredevold for pulling that off. That was a pretty powerful sprint. No matter how you slice it, wind, whatever.
I mean, she's strong. She had some
strong.
Really good wins at Tourigan earlier this year. So
yeah, 23 years old too. Yet another young SD Works star. Men's race, basically the opposite. Perfect positioning, letting everybody else do the work in the last 300, 200 meters, and then Valentin Madouas. See ya. Took the win. Not somebody that you would generally think of as being a sprint favorite. Now, this is a sprint of 4 riders, so this is not a bunch kick, which is obviously a very big difference. This was Madouas beating Mathieu Bergadou, whose name I cannot say without hearing Ian Treloar singing his name, and Felix Großschartner, perfectly played by Groupama, and Madouas' teammate Stefan Kung. Valentin Madouas taking that big win. Again, World Tour win. That's a big deal. Believe that's his first World Tour win, and he is a Breton rider, so nice to be able to do that.
Extremely happy.
Yeah. Good for Madouas. Sorry to Mathieu Bergadou.
Stefan Kung was pretty huge in that win, both because 2 riders from the same team in a 4-rider break, and also, it's a similar situation to the women's where you had this kind of surge and regroup, and Kung was there to keep that from happening when it looked like it might happen, and then kind of lead things out so that Madouas could sit on the back and then open a little gap to get up to speed and whiz by everybody. I'm surprised Kung isn't on better team. I have personal issues with the way Marc Madio, especially as he presented himself in Unchained, kind of runs a team, and I can't imagine any rider on that team wouldn't want to get away from that team as quickly as possible. I'm sure it's played up for the show, but it's just seems like a total goat rodeo.
I do think at Groupama, Stefan Kung gets a chance to really be a uncontested leader in a bunch of races, so he has to. I would imagine he likes that.
I think he would he would have better chances winning at a second option at.
Yeah, that's definitely a Christophe Laporte situation where maybe go to a better team and you win more.
Yep. That's what. Yeah.
You got to imagine that he just doesn't want to go and do domestique duties for every other day of the year, right?
That's true.
You got to think I don't know.
He's a big guy. He's a huge dude is always useful in a bike race, kind of regardless. So.
Yeah, when you said in the beginning of that, Cosmo, that he was huge in this race, my first thought was he's pretty much huge in every race. That's sort of his thing.
Fair.
That's his.
He's big in road cycling.
Yeah.
How much do you think his time trialing equipment? This is a question for Brendan. His time trialing equipment at Groupama FDJ affects the fact that he always comes fourth in time trials.
Yeah,
do you think that's the one thing holding him back. I don't know. That's
actually a really good consideration for him.
I have the same problem in Cat 3 road racing. I'm always 26th, yeah. And I think it's just because I don't have the wind tunnel time.
So that's me. Same here. When I'm trying to get Strava KOMs in and around Boulder, and it's just that Kaylee's in the top 10 of so many.
Jumbo-Visma, you wouldn't have to deal with this stuff.
That's true.
It's true.
You know who does have a lot of Strava KOMs in Boulder? Seb Kuss. You know what team he rides for? There you go.
That's it.
It's QED. All right. I think we've been pretty serious, kind of serious for long enough. If you have enjoyed this podcast, and if you enjoy the other podcast, even if you didn't enjoy this podcast, if you tried it out, but it's not for you, maybe you like Geek Warning, maybe you like Placeholders, maybe you like Wheel Talk, maybe you just want to read Johnny's articles over at escapecollective.com. He's shaking his head, but I want to read Spin Cycle.
I want to see the Spin Cycle Photoshop illustrations.
Every day, every Spin Cycle, my fiance is just waiting for that. She loves it. She loves the photoshopped laundromat. And so if you're into that, head on over to escapecollective.com/join and sign up. We'd love to have your support. Thanks for listening. Cosmo, Johnny, thanks for chatting. And we'll see you when we see you.